All right, so are you ready to like really dive deep into Macondo?
Let's do it.
Because today we're looking at Netflix's adaptation of 100 Years of Solitude.
Oh, big one.
Yeah, this is a big one. And we've got two reviews that I think take us beyond just like the initial hype.
Yeah.
One is really captivated by the visuals, but kind of wrestling with the book's heavier themes.
Mm-hmm.
And the other is praising how faithful it is to the story, but pointing out maybe some pacing concerns.
It's interesting because 100 Years of Solitude is such a landmark book, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
not just a story. It's like a cornerstone of magical realism,
Yeah,
and a Nobel Prize winner to boot.
exactly.
So trying to translate, like, generations of this family, a town steeped in magic, and this legacy that kind of looms over everything
Yeah,
onto the screen, it's got to be tough.
yeah, for sure.
It's like walking a tightrope between staying true to the book and making something that actually works visually.
Yeah, and speaking of visually, both of these reviews highlight how Netflix did not hold back.
Yeah, they went all out.
Yeah. Yeah, they called the production decadent,
I love that.
like elaborate costume special effects that bring Macondo to life in a way that even someone who loves this book
Mm-hmm.
never quite pictured.
Wow.
Like we're talking earth-shaking organisms, ghosts, just like part of everyday life. A plague of insomnia that feels way too real.
It makes you wonder, though, how those visuals actually tie into, like, the deeper themes of the story.
Oh, yeah.
The reviewer from Roger Ebert actually mentioned that, like, the Macondo they saw on screen was even more visually compelling than what they imagined when they were reading it.
Interesting.
And I thought that was fascinating. Like, for example, those earth-shaking organisms,
Uh-huh.
they're not just there for spectacle. They actually represent the Buendia family's impact on Macondo.
Oh, I see.
Like how their actions literally shake the town to its core.
That's such a good point. It's
Yeah.
not just about recreating the fantastical, it's about using it to underline the deeper meaning.
Exactly.
But then we get to the adaptation being super faithful to the book,
Right.
which is where things get kind of complicated.
Okay.
One reviewer points out that while this might please diehard fans,
Mm-hmm.
it also means bringing some of the more problematic aspects of the book to the screen, like unfiltered.
It really raises the question about choices in adaptation.
Yeah.
Like if we look at Colonel Aureliano Buendia and Remedios Moscote as an example,
Okay.
the book frames their relationship as romantic, even though he chooses her when she's still a child.
Right.
And the adaptation doesn't shy away from depicting this.
Yeah.
And the reviewer was critical of that.
Yeah.
They said it doesn't engage with how we understand those power dynamics now versus when the book was written back in 1967.
It does feel like a missed opportunity.
Yeah,
Like the series could have used this to offer a more contemporary perspective.
definitely.
I mean, other adaptations have done this really well, like Wicked,
Oh, yeah.
which reinterprets The Wizard of Oz.
Right.
Shows you can engage with the darkness, but also add layers of critique.
Wicked is a good example.
Yeah.
It doesn't shy away from the darker stuff in the Wizard of Oz story,
Uh-huh.
but it frames it in a new light, gives depth to characters that were pretty one-dimensional before.
Exactly.
Explores the complexities of good and evil in a really interesting way.
Exactly. And it's not just the Aureliano and Remedios storyline either.
Right.
You've got Arcadio's attempted assault, and then his subsequent relationship with Santa Sofia,
Yeah.
which the book portrays with like a disturbing lack of agency on her part.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's Pilar and her relationships with the Buendia boys when they're young.
Oh, yeah.
Again, framed as romantic, even though there's clearly this power imbalance.
Yeah.
The reviewer was really struggling with this,
Yeah, I can see that.
praising the production,
Bro.
but being deeply troubled by these elements.
I think it speaks to the larger conversation about Gabriel García Márquez himself.
Right.
Like, he's a literary giant, no doubt,
Mm-hmm.
but his work also reflects some of the troubling social norms of his time.
Yeah.
So how do we reconcile that? Can we appreciate the artistry while acknowledging the flaws?
Yeah.
And the adaptation, unfortunately, doesn't seem interested in, like, digging into those questions.
It does make you wonder if they could have achieved the same visual grandeur,
Yeah.
but also use those visuals to like nudge the narrative forward a bit,
Mm-hmm.
maybe make a statement.
Mm-hmm.
Like imagine how powerful it would have been to visually represent Santa Sofia's lack of agency
Wow, yeah.
in her relationship with Arcadio,
Hmm.
or to use the magical realism to show the impact of these power imbalances on the characters.
I think that would have been incredible. It would have
Yeah.
added a whole new dimension to the adaptation.
Right.
Allowed it to resonate with viewers on a much deeper level.
Yeah.
It could have been a commentary on how societal norms have evolved,
Mm-hmm.
but also how these themes are still so relevant today.
The other review we're looking at focuses more on the storytelling itself,
Okay.
praising the adaptation for capturing the book's magical realism,
Mm.
which is not an easy thing to do.
No, it's
No.
not.
But they also mention that the pacing suffers at times.
Interesting.
It seems like sticking so closely to the book might have made the story drag in places.
Yeah, adapting a dense, sprawling work like this is always a balancing act.
Right.
Staying true to the source material is important,
Uh-huh.
but you also have to make it work as a visual medium.
Yeah.
And that sometimes means streamlining things or rearranging certain elements to keep the audience engaged.
It's interesting because they also highlight how some of the acting elevates the material.
Oh, really?
Both reviewers mention Claudio Cattaneo as Colonel Aureliano Buendia,
Okay.
and both Nicole Montenegro and Akima, who play Rebecca at different ages, as standouts.
Interesting.
They say they bring this much-needed naturalism to these fantastical situations.
Finding the right cast is crucial, especially in a story that spans generations.
Absolutely.
It sounds like they managed to find actors who can really embody the essence of these complex characters,
Yeah.
even if the adaptation itself doesn't always delve into their complexities as deeply as it could.
One criticism both reviewers touch on is that some characters, specifically Jose Arcadio Buendia and his wife Ursula, feel more like archetypes than fully fleshed out individuals. Do you think that's a deliberate choice reflecting the book's use of symbolism, or is it a side effect of condensing such a massive story?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I think it's probably a bit of both.
Okay.
García Márquez often uses his characters to represent like broader ideas or historical forces,
Mm-hmm.
but the limitations of adaptation probably play a role too.
Yeah.
You know, when you're trying to fit a century of events into a limited series,
Mm-hmm.
some character development is going to fall by the wayside.
Right.
It's interesting to think about how that impacts the viewer, though.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, think about how you felt watching Ursula, for example.
Okay.
Did her symbolic role as the family matriarch kind of detract from her emotional impact?
Mm.
This is a key tension I think the adaptation is navigating,
Yeah.
balancing those grand symbolic figures with the need to create characters that resonate on a personal level.
It's a reminder that adapting a book is all about making choices,
It is.
about deciding what to emphasize and what to leave behind.
Yeah.
And sometimes those choices lead to both triumphs and compromises.
Exactly.
And that's what makes this deep dive so interesting.
It is.
We're not just looking at a visual adaptation of a story.
Mm-hmm.
We're examining how those choices shape our understanding of the book itself
Right.
and its place in our world today.
It's a whole other layer
It is a whole other layer.
to the whole experience.
Definitely.
Makes you wonder if they'd taken more liberties visually, if it would have landed differently.
Oh, how so?
Like, what if the magical elements weren't just